Good morning, guys. As you should remember from last class, we're starting a unit about the four major river valley civilizations. So as you can see, just a reminder, over here on the left we have the Nile River Valley, which is in today the country of Egypt. It is where the Egyptian civilization begins. We have what is called Mesopotamia, in between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers here in what today is Iraq. We have the Indus River Valley in what today is India, and then we have the Yellow River Valley in what today is China. So, if you can take out your note sheets, this is what it looks like. You'll need to take this out and follow along with the notes. So if you don't have it out, pause the video, take it out now, and get ready. So, this is a picture of the Tigris River. The two main rivers where civilization is considered to start are the Tigris and Euphrates, and you can see back here the remains of the early civilizations. So they were about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago when they start. They pick this place, as we've already discussed, because the rivers let you farm right next to the rivers, because the water is there and it provides good soil for growing things. It also gives you protection on one side. So people weren't using boats and river travel was not common like it is today. So it gives you protection from those nomads that we've talked about. Remember, we're still talking about the end of the Stone Age. People are living in nomadic groups until they start building these cities. So the first towns and cities are going to need protection from the other nomads who do not live in towns yet. The first permanent settlements that we've already looked at a little bit are going to be along these river valleys in the Neolithic period when they start farming. So we've seen a couple examples. We today are going to look at one called Mesopotamia, which is probably the most famous one, or possibly Egypt is the most famous one. This is the time period when we have mummies and pyramids and all that. The country that comes from the Indus River Valley is going to be later India, and then in China the Huanghe River or the Yellow River Valley civilization is going to eventually become today's China. In addition, we have a group of people called Hebrews. They are going to be living in between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. Today, those people would be called Jewish. The country that they eventually end up forming is called Israel. Close by, along the Mediterranean Sea, is also a group called the Phoenicians. Today that country is Lebanon. And then we also have a kingdom that is called usually Cush, sometimes Nubia. In the Bible it's called Cush. Today that country is Sudan, and it is next to, just south of Egypt, on the Nile River. So the Nile actually has two ancient civilizations that pop up. River valleys are called the cradles of civilization because along these rivers we have cities being born. The thing they all have in common, few things they have in common, they all have a social, they all have hereditary rulers, and that's called a dynasty. When one family is always the ruler in your country, it's called a dynasty. So in these dynasties, slavery is accepted. Slavery is going to be at the bottom of their social scale. It's not based on your skin color. It's usually based on if you got captured in a war or if you owed someone money. The second thing a lot of these places have in common is they are city-states. So a city-state is a city, a big city usually, 20 to 25,000 people, which is about the size of Fairfax City today, twice the size of Herndon. So it would be the city plus all the land around it that they needed to feed themselves. And eventually these are going to become kingdoms with a king in charge, and then eventually they'll take over their neighbors and become empires. And at this point in time, the government is usually run by the same people who are the religious leaders. It's called a theocracy. The other big thing that we're going to see is these civilizations are all going to come up with their own written code of laws. So we talked about writings going to appear in the Stone Age, and these are mostly our oldest writings. So in a place called Babylon, we have the Code of Hammurabi, which we will look at. The Jewish people are going to come up with something called the Ten Commandments, which we will also look at. And brings us to religion, because the Ten Commandments are religious, they're in the Bible. Most of these civilizations are going to be polytheistic. That means they believe in more than one God. With the exception of the Hebrews on the Jordan River and the Persians in what today is Iran, who will be monotheistic. They believe in one God. Now let's take a look at the actual writing from these civilizations. Pictograms are using pictures, as you can see down here, to represent specific words. Is the earliest form of writing. This is going to develop into this, which is cuneiform, where they take the pictures and they make it into more of a letter type thing. But like, for example, A might be a picture of an apple, and then that becomes an O or something like that, a circle or something similar. Hieroglyphics, which we're going to see in Egypt, and then in the Indus River Valley, something called Sanskrit, which the Hindu religion is written in Sanskrit still today. And eventually this is going to lead to an alphabet. So the first group that we know of that developed an alphabet is going to be the Phoenicians, and that is going to lead to all the other languages having alphabets, which makes it easier to write, and everyone will agree to use the same alphabet, so you can read everything. So, you can see the Phoenicians live right here. The Hebrews are going to live here. This is called Mesopotamia, and this shaded part here is called the Fertile Crescent because, as you can see, there's a bunch of rivers here, so everything grows very easily along these rivers. So fertile means like fertilizer. It's easy to grow things. So here's an example of cuneiform. You can see how originally the word for fish was a picture of a fish, and then they start doing this. It's quicker and easier, and then it changes to this, and then eventually in cuneiform it's going to be this, which looks kind of like this and kind of like this, but not really like that. So they're going to do that for every word. They're going to come up with letters. Which brings us to a place called Sumer. So Sumer is considered to be the world's first city. First civilization. It has 12 cities. The three biggest ones are here. Abraham from the Bible is supposed to have come from near Ur. And one of the things they are famous for is building something called ziggurats. These are temples. If you have heard of the story of the Tower of Babylon in the Bible was a ziggurat. And here is their social hierarchy. You can pause and take a look at this chart. It's very similar in all the civilizations we're going to look at. One of the things Sumer is most famous for, this is the oldest story that we know of. It's called Gilgamesh. It's a story of a godlike man. You can see it was written thousands of years ago. And the thing that is most interesting about this, besides its age, is it's a story of a giant flood, which is very similar to the story of Noah's Ark in the Hebrew Bible. And remember, the Hebrews lived not far away from Sumer. So it makes historians think that perhaps there was a big giant flood at one point. An archaeologist and geologist are investigating that all the time to try and see if the Noah's Ark story is a true story. And here's a quote from Gilgamesh. In Samaria, The religion was polytheistic, so they had many gods. Their gods were kind of harsh and not sympathetic, and they did have an afterlife. But it's different from heaven, as you can see there. You're viewed as becoming a zombie after you die. Now, the Sumerians, probably most important thing they do is they come up with this list of inventions. So wagon wheel allows them to travel. They have a potter's wheel, which allows them to make pottery quickly. Sundial, so they can keep track of time. They're going to come up with the most advanced number system at this point. They have a very advanced 12-month calendar. It's almost exactly like ours. They come up with a plow to attach to animals. It makes it easier to plant things. And they are going to come up with bronze, which is when you add tin and copper together. And so for a brief moment in time, they will have the strongest metal that anyone has, which makes them really scary if they attack you. Now, if you have any questions, make sure you ask next time you see me, which might be right now or it might be next class, depending on when you're watching this. The next video you will see will be about the Hebrews or the Jewish people.